never thought my own family would sit across from me, smiling politely, while already planning how to take everything I had left. Not my money, not my house, but my dignity. And the worst part? They truly believed I wouldn't fight back. At the time, I was 46, divorced, childless, and emotionally exhausted from years of family drama I kept pretending didn't exist. I had always been the responsible one, the peacemaker, the woman who swallowed her feelings to keep everyone else comfortable. That was my first mistake. Growing up, my family looked normal from the outside. Sunday dinners, holiday photos, polite laughter. But underneath it all, there was a quiet hierarchy. My parents favored my younger siblings openly, while I was praised only for being low maintenance. I learned early that love in our family came with conditions. When my parents passed within 2 years of each other, the grief hit me hard. But what followed was worse. The mourning barely ended before the family betrayal began to surface, slowly, politely, like poison mixed into tea. My siblings suddenly became very interested in family discussions. Their spouses started attending meetings they were never part of before, and a lawyer I had never met was suddenly CC'd on emails meant for transparency. That's when the family drama turned legal. They spoke softly, using words like fair, equal, and what mom would have wanted. But every conversation circled back to one thing: control. Control over assets, control over decisions, control over me. I was grieving, vulnerable, and desperate to keep what little family I had left, so I agreed to sit down, to listen, to compromise. That's what they wanted. Behind closed doors, I was being rewritten as the problem, the emotional one, the unstable sister who might make irrational choices. I didn't realize it yet, but the gaslighting had already started. Every time I pushed back, I was told I was being difficult. Every boundary I set was labeled selfish. Every concern I raised was dismissed as paranoia. This wasn't just disagreement. It was betrayal wrapped in smiles. What hurt most wasn't the money. It was realizing how easily they coordinated against me, like they had rehearsed it, like they had been waiting for the right moment. And I gave it to them. I didn't scream, I didn't threaten, I didn't expose them. I stayed quiet, because somewhere between those meetings and those carefully worded emails, I understood something powerful. If they believed I was weak, then they would never see what was coming. And that was exactly how I planned it. The meetings became routine after that, always polite, always scheduled, always exhausting. We would sit around a long dining table that used to belong to my parents, sipping coffee that tasted too bitter, listening to my siblings talk about what's best for everyone. Every sentence sounded reasonable on the surface, but underneath, the family drama was tightening its grip. I noticed patterns before I noticed proof. My brother would speak first, confidently laying out options. My sister would nod, adding emotional language. Mom worried about you. Dad wanted unity. Their spouses stayed quiet, but their eyes tracked every reaction I had. And the lawyer? He took notes without looking at me once. That was intentional. Whenever I asked a question, the room shifted. Whenever I requested time to think, I was pressured to decide faster. Whenever I disagreed, I was reminded of how fragile I'd been since the funerals. That word again, fragile. It was subtle gaslighting, perfectly disguised as concern. A classic betrayal that didn't explode, it seeped. And because it happened slowly, I kept doubting myself. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was being emotional. Maybe this was just family drama amplified by grief. So I started documenting everything. Not because I planned revenge, not because I distrusted them completely, but because something felt wrong and I had learned to trust that instinct the hard way. Emails turned colder, conversations happened without me. Documents were revised for clarity after I had already approved earlier versions. Each time I was told it was a misunderstanding, a mistake, a technicality. But mistakes don't always benefit the same people. One afternoon, I received an email attachment I wasn't supposed to see yet. It was a draft proposal outlining asset redistribution in the event of long-term incapacity. My name was listed, followed by conditions I had never agreed to. Decision limitations, oversight requirements, third-party control. I stared at the screen, my hands shaking. They weren't just planning around me, they were planning for a future where I no longer had a voice. That was the moment the betrayal stopped being emotional and became strategic. I confronted them carefully, calmly. I asked for clarification, pretending I didn't understand the implications. My sister smiled and said they were just protective measures. My brother assured me it was temporary. The lawyer finally looked at me then, and for a half-second his expression changed. That's when I knew. This wasn't chaos, this wasn't grief, this wasn't accidental family drama. It was coordinated. They believed I would either comply or collapse, that I would choose peace over power, silence over resistance. They underestimated how much clarity betrayal brings. So I did something unexpected. I agreed. I nodded. I thanked them. I said I trusted their judgment. And as the tension in the room eased, as they relaxed into their chairs, convinced they had won, I made a quiet promise to myself. If they wanted control so badly, I would give them exactly what they asked for, just not in the way they expected. After I agreed, everything changed. Not on paper, not officially, but in the way people behave when they think you're no longer a threat. The family drama softened its tone but sharpened its intent. My siblings became warmer, almost cheerful. Invitations increased. Messages ended with hearts and smiley faces. On the surface, it looked like reconciliation, but reconciliation doesn't come with surveillance. I started receiving check-in calls from people I barely knew, financial advisors, consultants, even a distant cousin asking oddly specific questions about my daily routine. Each conversation was framed as concern, yet every answer I gave seemed to travel faster than I expected. Information was currency now, and I was the resource. The betrayal grew clearer when my access began to shrink. Documents that once came directly to me were now routed through others. Decisions were announced rather than discussed. I wasn't included in planning, I was informed after the fact. Still, I stayed calm. I listened more than I spoke. I responded late. I asked simple questions. That silence unsettled them. One evening, my brother let something slip during a casual dinner. He mentioned a contingency plan, something that wouldn't matter unless I became uncooperative. He laughed when he said it, like it was a joke. I laughed too. But inside, something snapped into place. This wasn't just about money or assets anymore. This was about rewriting the narrative, painting me as unstable enough to justify control. A classic move in family drama: provoke quietly, document selectively, then claim concern. I realized how carefully they were baiting me. If I reacted emotionally, I'd prove their case. If I resisted openly, I'd look defensive. If I walked away, they'd call it abandonment. Every path they left me led to the same outcome: loss. That night, I cried, for the first time in months. Not out of weakness, but clarity. Betrayal has a strange way of stripping illusions, and once the illusion breaks, you stop asking why and start asking how. How long had this been planned? How many conversations happened without me? How much of my grief had they used as leverage? I stopped sleeping well after that, my mind replaying moments I had dismissed, glances exchanged, phrases repeated, silences that felt too heavy. all the signs of manipulation I had ignored in the meme of family. But here's what they didn't know. I wasn't alone. I quietly sought independent advice, not to accuse, not to confront, just to understand my position fully. I asked questions without names attached. I learned how control is established legally, how power shifts when someone underestimates you. And the more I learned, the calmer I became, because the truth was simple. They believed they were building a net around me, but they never checked whether I was holding the scissors. I didn't need to expose the betrayal yet. I didn't need to fight back loudly. All I needed was patience and timing. The breaking point didn't come with shouting. It came with an envelope. No warning, no explanation, just a thick, cream-colored packet waiting in my mailbox one quiet morning. The return address belonged to the same law firm my siblings had insisted was neutral. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a formal notice, written in careful, emotionless language, stating that certain decisions regarding my assets and future planning would now require shared authorization. The justification was vague but devastating. Concerns regarding emotional decision-making. That was how they described me. I sat on the edge of my bed, the words blurring as my chest tightened. This wasn't speculation anymore. This wasn't family drama whispered behind closed doors. This was action. Legal, calculated, final. I called my sister first. She didn't answer. I called my brother, straight to voicemail. For the first time since our parents died, I felt truly alone. The betrayal hit harder than I expected, not because I hadn't seen it coming, but because of how easily they crossed that line. No conversation, no warning, just a decision made about me without me. That night we met. They sat across from me with practiced calm, as if they were dealing with a difficult employee instead of their own sister. The lawyer spoke most of the time. My siblings nodded along, occasionally adding phrases like, "We just want to protect you," and "This is for your own good." Gaslighting at its finest. When I asked why this had happened without my consent, they claimed urgency. When I asked what emotional decisions I had made, they referenced moments of grief, times I cried, hesitated, or asked for space. Normal human reactions, reframed as liability. That was when something inside me finally broke. Not into rage, not into tears, into silence. I realized then that no explanation would save me. No amount of logic would undo a narrative already agreed upon. They didn't need me to be unstable, they just needed me to look that way on paper. So I stopped defending myself. I stopped arguing. I looked at each of them one by one and nodded. If this was the role they needed me to play, I would play it perfectly. I left that meeting feeling hollow but strangely focused. Betrayal has a way of burning away indecision, and as painful as that night was, it gave me clarity I hadn't had in years. They thought they had cornered me. They thought I would panic. They thought control meant victory. But control only works when the person being controlled doesn't understand the rules. And now I did. I went home and did something I hadn't done since this family drama began. I made a plan. Quiet, legal, irreversible, and I promised myself one thing. When karma came for them, it wouldn't be loud. It would be precise. I didn't rush. That was the first mistake they expected me to make. Instead, I let weeks pass. I complied with every request, signed where they told me to sign, attended meetings without objection. I became agreeable, predictable, exactly the version of me they felt comfortable controlling. From the outside, it looked like surrender. Inside, it was strategy. I learned quickly that people involved in family drama grow careless when they think the outcome is secured. My siblings started speaking more freely. Their messages became less filtered. Their assumptions slipped into conversations like truth. They believed the battle was over. I asked questions, not challenges, just curiosity. I requested clarifications for my peace of mind. I thanked them for protecting me. Every response they gave revealed more than they realized. And quietly, I began restructuring everything that was still fully under my control. I met with professionals they didn't know about, independently, confidentially. I didn't mention betrayal, I didn't accuse. I simply asked what options existed for someone in my position. The answers were eye-opening. Control, I learned, is rarely absolute. It depends on access, timing, and assumptions, and my siblings had built their plan on one dangerous assumption, that I would remain passive forever. I started by simplifying. Accounts were consolidated, permissions were clarified, contingencies were adjusted, all within my mights, all perfectly legal, nothing that would trigger alarm yet. When documents were presented to me for review, I took my time, asked for revisions, suggested minor wording changes. Language matters, especially in family drama disguised as legal care. One phrase at a time, I shifted power back into neutral territory. They didn't notice because they were focused on the end game, inheritance, authority, final say. They were greedy for control, and greed makes people impatient. The turning point came when they asked me to sign a final agreement. It was meant to lock everything in. I read it carefully, slowly. Then I smiled and said something that made the room relax instantly. "This looks fair." The lawyer nodded. My siblings exchanged satisfied glances. That was the moment they stopped paying attention. They didn't realize that one small clause, one sentence I had insisted remain, changed everything. It gave me autonomy at the exact moment they believed they had removed it. I signed, and just like that, the trap they had built closed. Not around me, around them. For the first time since the betrayal began, I slept peacefully. Not because it was over, but because it had already begun to end. They had wanted control. They had demanded authority. They had pushed for certainty. And I gave them exactly what they asked for. All that remained was for karma to do the rest. The meeting was supposed to be routine. No tension, no arguments, just final confirmations and signatures. Clean, professional, emotionless. My siblings arrived confident, almost celebratory. They dressed like people who believed the future belonged to them. I noticed the lawyer looked different. More cautious, less relaxed. We sat down, papers neatly stacked in front of him. He cleared his throat and began reading through the finalized document, summarizing sections everyone already believed they understood. I listened quietly. My siblings barely listened at all. Then he reached the clause, the one sentence. He paused. Just for a moment, but it was enough. His eyes moved back to the page, then up at me, then back down again. The room shifted, the way it does right before a storm hits. He read it aloud. In the event that any party acts in bad faith or seeks to exert unilateral control under the guise of protection, all delegated authority shall be immediately revoked. Silence. You could hear the hum of the lights above us. My brother frowned. What does that mean exactly? The lawyer didn't answer right away. He adjusted his glasses, suddenly very careful with his words. "It means," he said slowly, "that if there is evidence of manipulation or misrepresentation, control automatically returns to the individual." My sister turned to me. Her smile didn't reach her eyes anymore. "That clause was always there," I said softly. "You agreed to it." Confusion gave way to irritation, then suspicion. They started talking over each other, asking questions, flipping pages, searching for reassurance. The family drama they had carefully managed for months unraveled in minutes. The lawyer continued, his voice now steady, professional. He explained how recent actions, documented communications, unilateral decisions, and withheld information could be interpreted as bad faith. Their faces drained of color. I hadn't accused them. I hadn't needed to. They had created the evidence themselves. Suddenly, the power dynamic shifted. The people who once spoke for me were now scrambling to explain themselves. Every justification sounded weaker than the last. "This is a misunderstanding," my brother insisted. "We were only trying to help," my sister added. The lawyer closed the folder. "Intent will be evaluated," he said, "but until then, authority remains with her." With me. I sat there, calm, breathing evenly. I didn't smile, I didn't gloat. Revenge doesn't need an audience. This was karma. Not dramatic, not cruel, just consequences catching up. For the first time, I saw fear in their eyes, not because they had lost money, but because they had lost control. The meeting ended abruptly. As they stood to leave, no one looked at me. The silence between us felt heavier than any argument ever had. I gathered my things and walked out last, my footsteps steady. I hadn't destroyed them. I had simply stopped letting them destroy me, and that changed everything. In the weeks after that meeting, something unexpected happened. Nothing. No angry calls, no dramatic confrontations, no public fallout. The family drama that had once consumed every corner of my life simply collapsed under its own weight. My siblings stopped reaching out. The daily messages turned into weeks of silence. When communication did happen, it was short, careful, and filtered through professionals. The warmth they once used as a weapon disappeared, and I was okay with that. For the first time in years, I woke up without a knot in my stomach. I didn't check my phone first thing in the morning. I didn't rehearse conversations in my head. The absence of betrayal felt like relief, not loss. I grieved differently then, not just for my parents, but for the family I thought I had. For the version of love that required me to shrink to be accepted. For all the times I blamed myself for dynamics I didn't create. That grief was quieter, cleaner. People often think revenge is about watching someone else suffer, but real karma doesn't look like that. It looks like freedom. It looks like no longer being pulled into other people's chaos. My siblings never apologized, and strangely, I didn't need them to. I had learned something more valuable than validation, that family drama only has power when you participate in it. The moment I stopped reacting, stopped explaining, stopped trying to be understood, everything shifted. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. The betrayal changed me, but it didn't harden me. If anything, it clarified my boundaries. I became more intentional with my relationships, more selective with my trust, less afraid of silence. I stopped confusing familiarity with safety. That experience taught me that karma doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it works quietly, through clauses and consequences, through people realizing too late that they overplayed their hand. And sometimes the greatest victory is simply walking away intact. I didn't win because they lost. I won because I reclaimed myself. Have you ever stayed silent in a situation where everyone expected you to break? What would you have done if you were in my place?